Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of Tracking Your Life the Smart Way with AI. In this episode we'll take a look at function calling, specifically updating input logs and updating background information, the memory of your AI. Okay, you might be wondering, what is function calling and why do we need it? As you might know, large language models are quite non-deterministic, and sometimes you need guidelines and guardrails. This especially helps to make the output conform to your desired format. Now let's dive right in. I'll show you guys how this function calling works in practice. Okay, so this was the app that we had the last time, where we could input some text or do audio. How are you doing today? And then it gave us a response. Now this episode we will add this input log section and also this background info section. And instead of populating it manually, we will ask the AI to do it for us. So we will input some unstructured input, such as text or audio, and then the AI will handle the messy part of putting it into a structured format. Okay, as a first step, I will give you a sneak preview of how this looks like. So we have this input log section, the background info section, where we can add data manually, but also have the AI populate it automatically for us. Okay, so we can engage with the AI via chat, but now we can also update the background information. My name is Mike. I'm a 30-year-old male living in Munich, Germany. Okay, so we recorded this audio and it updated the background information, which you can see here. My name is Mike. I'm 30, gender is male, and I'm living in Munich, Germany. As a next step, let's try the input logging functionality. I'm currently recording a video in my car. Okay, so now it has added this log here, which we can also see here. So we have the content, the timestamp, the category, and some details. So next step, let's try updating the background info with our values and goals. My values are self-improvement in my health, and for my goal, I want to go to the gym every day for 30 minutes. Okay, so we see the background information has been updated, which we can check here. So we have the previous user profile and now also the values and the goals. Okay, first of all, let's take a look at the updated README. So now we added input logging and background information management powered by LM function calling, and this information is saved in the session state to maintain some memory about the user. This update has also been added to the features section. So here we see we have this background information management system where we can add goals, values, preferences, or personal information, and also the input logging where we can just add thoughts, observations, activities, and so on. And this information can either be added via a form or, the more interesting part, via LM function calling. So now we have our Gemini model intelligently deciding if it just responds to us via chat, logs a user input, or updates the background information. Also, instead of having 3 tabs, we now have the chat tab, the input log tab, and the background info tab that we saw before. Again, the input log tab allows us to manually log it or have the LLM do it intelligently via the chat. The same is the case for the background info tab, so we can manually input information or have the LLM do it intelligently. Regarding the code, we have now 2 new functions, process text input for log and update background info in session, which are intelligently called by the LLM, either through text or audio recording. Okay, so much for the high-level overview. Let's take a look at the Mermaid diagram where we can actually see the flow of how the interaction works. Okay, I hope you don't get freaked out by this. So this is basically just covering the 3 tabs that we saw before, the chat tab, the input log tab, and the background info tab. Let's start with the input log tab. So we have this form where the user can enter some text. This text is then processed by this process text input for log function, which then updates the session state. So after the session state is updated, the new input log is displayed in the input logs data frame. And then the cycle continues. You can enter some more data manually, it will update the session state, and the updated information is displayed to the user. Pretty much the same thing happens here in the background info tab. So the user enters some text into the text area form, submits it, which calls the update background info in session function, that updates the session state, and then the updated background info is displayed to the user in JSON format. And then the cycle continues. So the 2 new input log and background info tabs are actually very simple. The interesting part happens in the chat tab. So again, we have an input, either text or audio. This is being processed and added to the user history, and then displayed to the user. And then in the background, we call this getChatResponse function from the backend, where the LM decides the action. So we can either have a direct text response if the user just says hi or asks a question, or for a more elaborate request, we can do function calling. So currently we have 2 functions defined, either log input or update background, and the LM intelligently decides which one to call. After either function is called, we get the function execution result, which the LM then uses to formulate its response. And this response is then also added to the conversation history. The same happens for simple text responses without calling any functions. It's also added to the conversation history. After it's added to the conversation history, it's of course also displayed in the chat. Then the cycle continues. We can add more text or audio inputs, and the LM processes it intelligently via function calls or direct text responses. Okay, now that we saw how this works in a high level, let's go back to the code. So first of all, let's look at the changes in the front end. What you see directly, we import two new functions, which is process text input and update background info. And then here we have the three tabs: chat, input log, and background info. Tab 1 is pretty much the same that we saw in the last episode, so I'll skip this for now. Okay, so tab 2 is new, where we see the logged inputs. And the logged inputs are saved in a pandas data frame, and then via Streamlit displayed via a Streamlit data frame. And underneath the displayed inputs, we also have the input form, where we can add inputs manually. So when you add inputs manually, it's just added to this data frame here and then displayed to the user. And the interesting part happens in this process text input for log function, which we'll take a look in a bit. Then tab 3 is our background information section. So again, we display all the current background information data, but then we also have this manual input form where we can just add some data and then save it. Also, the interesting merging and updating happens in this update background info and session function in the backend. Okay, so these are already all the changes in the front end. So let's go to the backend. Okay, so first of all, we notice that there are function declarations here. With these function declarations, we provide guidelines, which we see here in the description, and guardrails here in the parameters section. So the function expects an object containing a text input and a category suggestion element, of which the text input is required. So the category suggestion is optional. And then we have also defined that they both have to be of type string. Okay, so that's the process text input for the logging. And right below we have the update background info function. Again, a description which provides the guideline and the parameters which represent the guardrails. So again, this needs to be of type object that contains a background update JSON string, which we see below is also required. Okay, so here we can see the implementation of process text input for log, which adds the text input to a log entry dictionary. And this log entry dictionary is then added to the session state, which keeps track of all the past inputs and appended. And after the log entry has been appended, we also return it to the front end here. Similarly, for the update background info in session function, we expect a JSON string and a session state. We load the JSON string into a Python dictionary and then either extend, merge, or override the dictionary with new information. So for example, if the user said his age is 30 and now says the age is actually 31, it would update the dictionary. If the user provides some new goals or new values, we would extend the list. Or if there's some completely new field, we will just override or add a new key. And then the updated background information is returned to the front end. Okay, so here we just have some placeholder functions, so I won't cover them. The next interesting part is here in getChatResponse, where we now added a more extensive system prompt with instructions for the AI assistant, also information about the current user background information, any historical input logs, and function calling rules. So this is telling the LLM when to call which function or when to just respond to the user via a simple text response. Okay, so and when the LLM decides to call a function, we will handle it here. So typically, Gemini provides a function call attribute that contains both the function name and the arguments, which we then take to call our functions. So either process text input for log or update background info in session. Then when the function has been successfully executed, we get the function response content added to the conversation history and display it to the user. And if the LLM decides to not use a function, we just have a simple text response. So here we extract the text part and add it to the user history, which is then displayed to the user again. Yeah, so that was already it. You can try it out yourself, again with Docker. Again, so Docker build, where you can build the image. And to run it, you would just do Docker run again, which starts your app that we saw before here. Okay, I hope you guys liked this episode. In the next episode, we'll add a new tab, a task tab. That means 4 tabs in total. And we'll have some more advanced function calling, making use of asynchronous processing. I hope I see you guys in the next episode. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you'd like to know. Leave a like, and bye-bye.